Hello everybody, today we're looking at Blender and Python. So this Blender Python tutorial is going to be a little bit different to what you probably find on the rest of YouTube because I'm doing it all with Jupyter Notebook, and I think it's actually beneficial to do it this way because you can get a nice clean view of your code. You can have nice large font and you can get the previews. So how do I do that? Well, first let's look at Linux, Blender, Notes, Blender 3.0 manual, advanced command line, launching from the command line, plenty of info here. So this is probably the first place you'd want to come to. Once you've got it in Blender installed, then you'd probably want to come and look at this, which is the Python options. And the bit that you'll probably be most interested in is here. So what you want to do is run the given Python script file, and the syntax for doing that we'll see in a minute, but one good article that's helped me a lot here has been tabreturn.github.io. So if you actually come and see this page, there's some pretty amazing animation here. So if you want to get into NFTs, potentially make some money from non-fungible tokens, then you might want to come and have a look at this because you can do some pretty cool stuff. So one of the first things you'll see is import BPY when you start using Blender with Python. So let's get on with it, shall we? These are my Jupyter files. One other thing, to use Jupyter, you will just need to know how to add images into your Jupyter notebooks, which I'm about to show you. So let's get over to the code. Just a little note about OpenGL here, because if you want to create stuff for Decentraland, for instance, you want to make a model, you will need to familiarize yourself and work out how to export to gltf. But that's if you want to make a 3D model for Decentraland or something like this. What we're concentrating on here today is actually creating images using Blender and Python. So as I say, that's a very useful resource to go and visit. So first, let's look at some code and import BPY, as I've just mentioned. The bpy.ops mesh primitive conad, you'll find this in most of the documentation and tutorials. So that's pretty much the code which will make you a cone, and you can play around with these numbers. These are the viewpoint, so where the camera's coming from. If you've used Blender within the actual GUI, you'll know that you can move the camera about, change the lighting, materials, and reflections, and so on. Output. This is when I'm going to output the PNG file. So basically, I'm taking a snapshot of the 3D model. So at this point, we're not actually interested in exporting the 3D model. We're just interested in saving the image and viewing it within Jupyter Notebook. So we just want to see what we're actually creating before we get involved in exporting it. bpy.contextscene.render.filepath equals output. So it's basically saying render it to this path, which is my desktop on my Linux Mint PC. And then it's saying render it. And what's it going to render? So this is the code which actually creates the model in Blender. So then what I have to do is then export that code, the Python code, to a text file with a .py file extension. And then, if you've not done this before, to run an external command from within Jupyter Notebook, you just use the exclamation mark. So here, this is the very important bit you'll need to memorize really, or you'll just use over and over. Exclamation mark Blender. And then as per the documentation, you do -- background, which tells it basically to run headless. And then it's saying run Python, run this Python script. So all that is actually doing is running the code which we've put in here. And the reason I've done it as a doc string because we're writing all of this Python code to a file. And we use W. So just W, don't do WB. Right, so let's just run this then. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate the Python code. So nothing's happened there, or visually nothing's happened there. It's actually created the Python file. And I've already run this several times so you can see previous output, but let's run it now and you'll just get an idea of how quickly it works. And that ran in 1.6 seconds and then it quit Blender and it rendered 64 samples. And you can see cube, light, camera, cone. And that's our first image. And by using from my Python import display, I can then display the image within the cell within Jupyter Notebook. So I think this is a really nice way of just working quickly and efficiently with your Python code and viewing it here. If you run it within Blender, you will just have so much visual clutter. And the whole point of this is automation. So we don't want to be opening Blender, clicking buttons, clicking menus and so on. So this is effectively the pinnacle of automating. You don't actually need to open Blender at all. Obviously, to learn Blender, and I'm no expert in Blender, but yeah, you will obviously want to play around with Blender itself. But once you know what you're doing, then you can come here and automate it. And the whole point of this video is that you can automate it and just run it all from Jupyter Notebook. So hopefully this is, if it's not new to you, then apologies, but I think it's pretty cool. So create. This is my next one, foo3. So we've got some different code here. Basically what we're doing is we're creating cone 1, a second cone. And when it renders it, you'll notice there's always a cube there. The cube is always started there. It is always in each scene at the start. So we'll have a cube and 2 cones.
Or smaller.
Hang in there. We'll get to that in a minute. So again, we're writing my code. We're writing all of this to a Python file. We're running it in Blender with Python in the background running it. So there we go. And then we're going to display it. So I've already done it once, but I'm just going to run it again here. And there we go. Rendering scene. And yeah, it's created 2 cones and a cube. So that was the code for each cone, primitive underscore cone. And the cube you get in every scene by default. So next, what we'll do is we'll create another example, foo4, so a different Python script. And what we're going to do is these 3 lines here. For object in bpy.data.objects, if object type equals mesh, then remove it. So what it's basically doing is at the very start of the code, it's looking for any mesh objects and deleting them. So that's getting rid of the cube. I've just created this because I'm starting to experiment with variables. And then you say, I'm just going to create 5 objects and 5 cones, sticking with the cones. And I'm just starting to experiment with changing the viewpoint. So I'm just putting, you can put 0, 0, 0 or 1.1.1, 1.1, 1.1 there. Output, again, I keep updating foo4 to match the name of the Python file which is creating it. And yeah, let's just run it. Take a bit longer, there's more objects here. And you can see it's created us 5 spiky cones. So hopefully this has just given you a really quick whistle-stop introduction to using Blender with Python without actually using Blender GUI. And you probably won't see this in many tutorials, if any, on YouTube. So hopefully this has kind of proved valuable to you, because really if you're thinking about automating this, especially with a view to creating NFTs using Blender, obviously you'd need to get more proficient at Blender than what I've shown you here. But really the whole point of this video is running Blender with Python in Jupyter Notebook and viewing the initial results. So there we go. Hopefully this has been interesting. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And thumbs up, subscribe and all that. Thank you.